What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. I hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Today we're going to be doing a Chicago Cubs season preview and prediction. We'll be taking a look at their depth chart, breaking that all down, and make sure to stick around for the end of the video because I'll be giving you my predictions on what to expect from the NL Central Division. But in terms of the Chicago Cubs, I mean, they're a team who won the World Series in the 2016 season, but right now they're in what I'd call a middle state. If you look at this roster and their depth chart, they're a very talented team. And even being the sellers that they've been so far this offseason, this is a team that's not going to tank. But over the course of the past few years, they've had a lot of trouble sort of backing up what they did in 2016. We're going to talk, as I said, about the NL Central Division later on in this video. But the St. Louis Cardinals making a push, but for the most part, this NL Central Division is very wide open. And sort of surprisingly, the Cubs chose to go the route of being more sellers this offseason. Yes, they got Joc Pederson, but they traded Darvish, number 2 in NL Cy Young last year. They traded him to the Padres, and also being involved in talks of possibly trading Hendricks and Kris Bryant. So, you know, again, a very talented team when we look in terms of the Cubs, but they got to pick a direction to go. Either they're going to go for it because they still do got talent on the roster, or you become sellers and start rebuilding, because you do got a lot of young players as well in the system, in the lineup. But let's take a look. So we'll move on to the depth chart in the lineup. But before we do, just note that I am using Roster Resource on Fangraphs as reference. But anyways, their lineup. First up, Ian Happ in center field. Ian Happ is a guy who is still fairly young. He's about a half year away from turning 27 years old. He's a guy that the Cubs have always had high expectations on, but hasn't necessarily reached those expectations yet. Now, according to Fangraphs, he's a guy who could potentially, this year, he's projected to hit 28 home runs. And you know, that's not an unrealistic expectation. Ian Happ is a guy who had the best year of his career probably in 2020, maybe with the exception of his rookie year. But he's a guy, again, who's got power. He's been inconsistent. If he can keep that average up, hopefully above the 250 mark, I think Ian Happ can definitely take a step up this year. But again, Ian Happ pushing 27 years old. He's not that young guy anymore for the Chicago Cubs. Quality player, but if he's going to reach the potential, he's going to have to do it soon. And I think this year he's in a prime spot to break out. Next, we got Anthony Rizzo, probably one of the most consistent players in all of baseball. He's a guy who's going to put up probably right around 30 home runs as well. The Cubs have a lot of power really throughout this whole lineup, but especially at the top of the lineup. Anthony Rizzo was a bit down in average last year, but for the most part over the course of his career, he's been really consistent. Again, want to see that average right around the 270-ish mark. And I think you got, again, a 30 home run hitter, fantastic hitter in your 2 spot. In your 3 spot, you got Kris Bryant. Now, Kris Bryant is interesting because the Chicago Cubs have been, taking calls about potentially trading him. Now, Kris Bryant has had some issues on staying on the field in the course of the past few seasons, but when he is on the field, he's a pretty good defender at third base, a guy who's going to put up 25 home runs, potentially, an average above 250, and be one of the more quality hitters, I think, in the National League. Batting fourth and obviously catching, we got Willson Contreras. Now, Willson Contreras was fairly decent in the 2020 season, but had the best year of his career, in my opinion, in the 2019 season. Contreras, they have him projected 17 home runs. A good year for Contreras, I think, would be pushing that 25 home run mark. It would complete the Cubs lineup, and I also do think he is very capable of it. Contreras got to keep that batting average right around 250, and I think you got a really quality hitter in your 4 spot. Number 5 is Javier Baez, potentially one of the best defensive, if not the best defensive shortstops in all of Major League Baseball. He's a guy who's probably, if not really close to being the best power hitter in this lineup, but he struggled last year in terms of consistency and in terms of especially his average. He's got to find consistency at the plate, got to cut down strikeouts, and you can't just be a home run hitter. We see so many guys who are just like Baez. Not saying Baez is going to continue that streak, but where you're only home run hitters. And I'm a Blue Jays fan, so I've spoken to sort of the adjustments that Grichuk made, who is only a home run hitter. You got to become that more complete hitter. I want to see Baez get that average up. 275 is the mark that I would put for him and what I would call a good season. And obviously 30 plus home runs, I think, would be realistic for Baez. Joc Pederson. Probably the biggest addition that the Chicago Cubs had in this offseason, at least so far. A big power hitting left fielder who's primarily played over the course of his career for the Dodgers. Guy who is going to probably put north of 30 home runs in a good season if he can find some consistency at the plate. And I think you're sort of getting the memo with this entire Cubs lineup. Got to find the consistency. There are guys who have had some down years, whether it's last year or in a couple years in the past, but a lot of talent in this lineup, especially when we look at it in terms of power. You got Nico Hoerner batting 7th, playing second base. Big prospect for the Cubs. Don't exactly know what he's going to do this year. 270 average. I'd like for him to get into double-digit home runs. And then batting 8, you got Jason Heyward probably playing right field, and a guy who's going to give you 15-plus type home run power in your 8 spot in this lineup. In terms of the Cubs rotation, I mean, it's interesting because you traded away your ace from last year in terms of Darvish, traded him to the Padres, as I mentioned before. He had a fantastic year last year, finished number 2 in the NL Cy Young Award votings for a reason. I'll read the projected rotation here on Fangraphs. Kyle Hendricks, Zach Davies, Alec Mills, Trevor Williams, and Adbert Alzolay. It's an okay rotation. In terms of the projections on Fangraphs, I mean, they seem to not like this rotation at all. When you're looking at Kyle Hendricks, they have him projected as a 4.27 ERA. I think that would be the worst ERA of his career. Kyle Hendricks has been underrated for the course of the past few seasons. He's not as good as he was a few years ago, but he's definitely still a really quality pitcher, and there's a reason, as a Blue Jays fan again, that I have him in one of the starters that I was hoping the Blue Jays could potentially trade for. In terms of Zach Davies, I think I had him in my breakout players video last year. He's a guy who's, never really broken through. Again, projected just under a 5 ERA, but I really think this is a guy who, the goal for him should be a 3.5 ERA. Bottom 3 guys in the rotation, they all have projected right around a 5 ERA. Again, I think if the Cubs really do try to compete, you need a starter or 2, but it doesn't seem like they're going to be buyers in the offseason. Obviously, if they wanted to build a really solid rotation, you wouldn't have traded Darvish. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, you got some quality pieces in the rotation. You got some quality pieces in the lineup. So you're not tanking, even if, let's say, you do trade a guy like Hendricks. But then on the flip side, the Cubs are still quite a ways away from being back to where they were in 2016. We'll just round out the depth chart with the bullpen really quickly. Probably the weakest part of the Cubs, in my opinion. You got Craig Kimbrell, Rowan Wick, Jason Adam. It's an okay bullpen as well. I mean, Kimbrell isn't what he used to be. Like a guy like Kenley Jansen last year for the Dodgers who had a down year. I mean, I expect a guy like him to bounce back. I don't really see that with guys in the Cubs bullpen. But again, it's okay. I think it'll do the job for where the Cubs are this year. And I'm sure, if the Cubs are making a push come near the trade deadline time, I'm sure, relievers are fairly easy to trade for. Just to end off the video, as I was saying before, my predictions for the NL Central Division. Which, again, in my opinion, is a very wide open division. Yes, the Cardinals are probably the favorites in the division because they added Arenado. But overall, you look at the Pittsburgh Pirates, probably the worst team in baseball. You look at the Milwaukee Brewers, who have a ton of talent, but had some down years last year. Yelich, Keston Hiura had down years. You got the Cincinnati Reds, who just lost Trevor Bauer. They're a team who's always sort of sat in the middle to bottom tier of this division, and they haven't really added pieces that would make them any threat, in my opinion, to the Cubs if they ended up trying to make a push, or to the Cardinals at the top of this division. Again, as I was mentioning, I think the Cardinals are definitely in the best position right now with the addition of Arenado. And I also think that the Cardinals are probably going to end up making another addition because I think, they're going to be at the top of this division. And come trade deadline time, they'll probably be trying to make another push towards the playoffs and possibly a deeper run into the playoffs. So I would put the Cubs at number 2. Again, I think they could potentially make some additions, but it's looking like they're more sellers right now. So we'll just have to wait and see. But let me know your thoughts on the Chicago Cubs, what they've done this offseason, what you expect from them in the 2021 season. Let me know that down in the comment section below. Anyways, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more MLB content just like this. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you again next time.